Good afternoon, everyone. Ooh. Mic check. My name is Val Red. I'm from the Air Force Research Laboratory. I'm very glad to be here. I'd like to thank Jake for kind of pulling my leg, inviting me over here. I do a lot of talks with the ISC squared. I recently actually passed the CISSP, but I'm actually really young, so I still am 3 years short of actually having the title. So actually, if you're all interested in that type of stuff, you can actually pass the exam before having 5 years of experience, and you can actually become an associate of ISC squared, which basically gives you equivalent benefits to being almost like a CISSP. And once you reach the 5-year mark in any career field related to IT and basically the main components of the CISSP, you basically just automatically earn the title. So getting it out of the way early is really cool, and it's like a cool bragging thing. It's kind of funny just seeing everyone say like their emails off of CISSP. It's kind of awkward though too, because I actually just don't like. I actually never usually pay attention to it, but you will start to realize as you kind of move up and kind of talk to a lot of people who do a lot of program management or like manage hackers. They actually do look at those credentials, but it's kind of an interesting hurdle that once you get past, you just kind of laugh about it after the fact. Although 250 questions over the course of 6 hours is kind of painful. But I'm happy to be here to represent Air Force Research Laboratory, and I've been invited to talk about cyber operations in 2020 and kind of what your appetite on what you have to look forward to on not just the hackathon, but basically your potential future as hackers. Next slide. All right, awesome. So I actually come from a hackathon kind of like that arena. It's kind of a interesting subculture. So back in the day, I actually in undergrad, I actually had the opportunity to be able to go to the Google, their new shop up at New York City when they'd taken over the Port Authority building. They bought it and they set up shop over there. And having that experience of actually working with the Free Software Foundation through one of their actual events where you could actually kind of like do some really cool development and hacking with Google, I kind of realized how awesome the hackathon scene is and how far it allowed me to kind of progress as a person. So there's a lot of cool things that you can get out of just being a part of the hackathon scene. I have a friend now, actually out of that, one of my friends is actually now at Google as an engineer. Another one of the people in our team is now in JP Morgan. Another one's at Amazon. And I just hack stuff at the Air Force Research Laboratory. And I got a cool wig out of it. And I still have it today. So I might just on that real quick and finish my presentation with the wig on. The other thing is you actually will see that my partner's wearing like their little Google sweaters. So it's actually kind of an interesting sentimental point to me. Like, coming from the hackathon scene, there's a lot you can kind of get out and from these types of experiences. Besides just like the experience of being able to break things, you kind of can look back and say, oh wow, I got this random Google hoodie just for being really bad at breaking web apps. So this was from their old 24 Hours of Good program in New York City, and this hackathon scene is a very insightful and kind of like a really cool way to kind of develop your skills. So that being said, there's a lot of cool things with cyber operations and how it developed over time. From coming out of that hackathon scene in Google, I ended up doing some really fun stuff with with industrial control systems, and I actually ended up putting in for the 2015 SANS ICS Cybersecurity Challenge. I started up first, but a few days later, some people kind of saw that I was up there with a rainbow wig, and they kind of took it personally. So a bunch of people kind of bonded together and knocked me down to 10th. But it was still a pretty interesting experience being able to kind of, without the actual hands-on background in industrial control systems, actually just kind of learn everything that kind of happens behind the scenes with like the different types of protocols. So as you progress, you might learn about things like Modbus, and then you realize that later on in your career that there's actual GitHub scripts that actually allow you to inject into Modbus, which is pretty wild. And even though I finished 10th, there were still 400 other competitors that could have possibly actually come out of the industry. So just staying on top of these skills, even coming out of college and actually having a career in the Air Force Research Laboratory, it's always awesome to still be involved in events like hackathons or cybersecurity challenges and such. But what about 2020, which is what I was probably invited here for and what Jake actually wants me to talk about. So about that, 2020 is going to be pretty wild, and we might as well just call it right now. I'm just kidding. This is probably going to be a scene in a movie between now and 2020, though. So There's always that. But actually, to not take advantage of the whole BuzzFeed scene, I actually just decided to kind of talk to 5 concepts to think about cyber operations in 2020. So my actual background with the Air Force Research Laboratory is to kind of lead a lot of the cutting edge type of research and development in terms of capabilities and technologies that might be used by hackers and some of our actual cyber defenders in the long-term future. So a lot of this stuff, it's actually public knowledge, but the way I'm phrasing it to you is just basically from my experience of being able to talk to a lot of people, having the honor of being able to kind of go out to a lot of different types of conferences and being able to talk to a lot of people who are really trying to move forward in terms of a lot of the crazy developments that you'll see. So a lot of the skills that you are going to be taking out of today and tomorrow, which for this hackathon, will definitely pay dividends as you start thinking about 2020. So this is going to be very high level, but as we slowly but surely march towards 2020 and maybe go through 4 or so more hackathons like this, actually 8, I guess you guys do this biannually, but there's definitely a lot to think about. So as you are kind of doing the mundane capture the flag type challenges and these side challenges that might be out and about during this event, you might want to think about, in the long term, how you can actually make very substantial contributions in 5 of these areas. So the first thing is, we're definitely going to need to hack better automation or even AI as we scale up. So it's not just good enough to be able to kind of write really good firmware or buffer overflow exploits to break firmware. At some point, it's going to come to a head where the best of the best will be the people who are able to write the best mechanisms to automate hacking, because the human element in hacking is kind of the biggest thing that we can defend against, and kind of just buying ourselves time will kind of help us kind of defend our networks a lot better. But on the other side, the adversaries are getting a lot better at kind of automating their own tools. So from the attacks that you've observed, and you might have heard about 2 or 3 weeks ago with the Dyna hacks, there's a lot of automation that kind of gets involved in terms of being able to actually round up 10 or actually hundreds of thousands of network devices and be able to kind of leverage those types of attacks. And on the defensive end, it's even more difficult because all it takes is one of those types of attacks to cripple your network. So if you're going to be a hacker and try to work for the greater good of everyone, you really need to consider how to really automate your defenses and even kind of get into very scary fields of machine learning and AI, or deep learning or neuromorphic computing, which definitely play a larger role in a lot of the future of intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems. So mass is going to be very, very important, and the effects of mass, no pun intended. But the huge thing, going back in towards the Dyna attacks, the Internet of Things has pervaded to a point where there basically will be too many devices out in the wild to kind of account for. So we're going to have to consider a highly contested internet over the long-term future. On top of that, there's the human element. The Arab Spring probably was one of the first times we saw something as kind of huge-scale cyber activism and getting to the point of actually having very substantial and almost revolutionary effects in a geopolitical region. So it's interesting to consider that, out of the types of hacks that you might leverage today, how those hacks could potentially, kind of be an interesting model for attacks or defenses that might actually be able to turn the tide of a lot of these, a lot of events that aren't just happening in just online networks, but even beyond online networks, the society and societies internationally as well. So it'll be interesting to leverage not just the cyber capabilities technically, but to actually leverage them in a way that actually has some very substantial impacts to society as well. Finally, privacy versus security will still be a huge issue. It's kind of awesome. I actually got to meet Dr. Peter Eckersley from the Electronic Frontier Foundation 2 weeks ago, and I was able to congratulate him in person about 10 million free SSL certs being distributed just by this one root CA that had emerged within a year's time. At the same time, though, it kind of creates an interesting proliferation of trust that might actually cause us to double back and kind of really think about if it's really worth trusting all 10 million devices. And that's just one root CA. Imagine all the other CAs that have been around since the 90s and the early 2000s. So to put it into perspective, most browsers actually still have the Hong Kong Post Office root certification authority as one of the trusted sources. So to put that into perspective, any of those types of websites could be the green icon that you see in the top left. So being able to kind of live with this and educate people on it, or actually develop technologies that present alternatives to things like the public key infrastructure that kind of gets us into these interesting scenarios, will definitely be a very interesting topic of conversation for hackers and developers for the next few years, for the near-term years, and even years beyond that. Fourth, I'd like to talk about smart stuff, which aren't really smart. So I like to reference this very wonderful Twitter feed that I probably won't be able to say a lot in this venue, but if you kind of look for the Internet of Things, Twitter parodies, this is probably one of the major ones. Here's one where that tells you about your toilet paper. At the same time, though, even if you have even if you have these funny ones, there are also a lot of ones that have very important roles in everyday life. People are actually starting to use them for managing their food, managing their housing, their actual housing resources. And there's a lot of not only money involved, but there will eventually be lives at stake. So when you kind of start looking at like embedded systems, even something as small as a router and switch, a lot of the ways that they're designed in terms of a very lightweight kind of like firmware and lightweight hardware, those are going to be very interesting to kind of make analogies towards different types of smart devices or purportedly smart devices that'll actually kind of be a very huge target for adversaries in the near-term future. So that'll be very interesting. And finally, we will still need a boatload of hackers. And this is where you all come in. So I kind of grew up where the hackathon scene was kind of new, and like Google actually, to be honest, like they weren't really sure how to tap on that very much. But I think we're getting to this point where we have enough people who have kind of grown up with that type of scene and are kind of realizing the benefits of not just being in these like closed communities of hackers, but actually reaching out and going away from places like New Jersey, where I came from, and kind of coming up with some really grandiose scale type events that kind of help train the next generation of hackers. One of the opportunities that I'll talk about is actually Hack the Pentagon, which is actually a very legitimate, like kind of crowdsourced event where you can actually look at networks, public-facing networks that are in the .mil space, and actually scan them for vulnerabilities and actually interact with them and actually be able to report those vulnerabilities through channels that actually end up going to the Department of Defense, which is a huge deal. And the fact that we were able to kind of very successfully pull this out, I think there were several thousands of dollars that was handed out as bounties for this. So in the future, you should definitely not just look at the hackathon scene from like just static events, but you should definitely look at like things that are crowdsourced, such as Hack the Pentagon and a whole bunch of other scenes, because there's so much kind of going on right now in the world in cyberspace. It's kind of really important to keep a really good pulse out there in terms of what the opportunities are, what your niche might be, because there's so much out there in terms of research development that I couldn't even wrap my head around. And I even got invited to do this talk, but I actually think that this is one of the strongest types of venues where to advance people's skills and kind of get people really on board with advancing cyber capabilities over the long-term future. So definitely keep an eye out on events like this, events like Hack the Pentagon, and stay active as hackers. And that being said, you better get hacking. Thanks, and good luck, have fun. So just to conclude, I'd like to thank Jake again for having me. I'd like to wish you all best of luck during the hackathon. I might be around maybe not for the red team this time. I might be, if you guys have anything that you need assistance with, I might be able to give you some tips. Also, there are a bunch of people around here tonight. I know there's a job fair tomorrow, but there's a bunch of people out here tonight that would also love to speak with you about opportunities, not just with the local organizations that we have here, but people from all the way from Washington. So this is like DEF CON Spot and Fed. If you can find them, they might be able to entertain you for a while. And that being said, thanks again for having me, and have fun.